This is Can I Laugh on Your Shoulder? Anthony, it's a big day because I am welcoming you back to my show. Welcome. It's so good to have you.
Molly, man, thank you so much for having me. It's been a journey to get up here to my hotel room just so I can talk with you. So I'm excited to
This
be
is,
here, and thanks for having me back.
that's the cool thing about technology is like you just got off a plane, which I like feel very honored that like when I travel and I get off of a plane, I want to nap. And so the fact that you are coming on a podcast makes me feel very, very grateful. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. Before we get into the Anthony 201 and all of that, my listeners know that whenever I have somebody on the podcast more than once, which is a very rare occurrence. So, although it's not as rare, 8.5 years in, like you start to have some repeats, but it's a pretty rare occurrence. And I bestow upon my two-time guests, you have to use a little bit of like sanctified imagination to give you an imaginary, like on SNL, the Five Timers Club, when they host Five Times. On my show, you get a imaginary velvet jacket, and on the velvet jacket is a patch with my face on it.
I
So
appreciate it. I don't know
you're
if I'll
welcome.
wear it, but I definitely have it up in my office somewhere, though.
Frame it, like put it in a frame. Anyway, well, like I said, I'm really excited to have you back on. And so welcome. So, like you did on the last time, and like I think I said it was before I even rebranded. This is probably like 3 or 4 years ago. That was the Anthony 101. And so some stuff's happened. So give us Anthony 201. So tell us kind of what life has looked like for you in the last few years and where you are right now.
Man, such a huge transition from the 101 version of AO to 201 version of AO. 101 version of AO was working with, a phenomenal brand, a phenomenal company. And so since then, the 201 version is I've stepped out on my own and I've started really, I've always had a heart for minority people to help them build wealth, to help them get access to financial literacy in the less fortunate communities. And so the 201 version of me is doing just that. It's really going back into the inner communities, the less fortunate communities, and bringing hope, bringing God, bringing financial literacy from from a spiritual perspective into these low communities, man. And it's been such a huge, huge, huge honor to be able to do so. We're almost at 1 million subscribers on YouTube. I'm launching my third book here in a couple of weeks. I have a little over 8 full-time employees on my staff. We've been honored in amazing magazines and just really just taking this hard on, man. And I moved to last time I talked to you, I was living in Nashville, and I
Yeah.
moved to DC. So I'm in the DMV, and I just
Hey,
really
that's
it's
where
like,
I'm from.
yes, yeah. So I'm in the Maryland side of DMV. So I'm excited.
Nice. Yeah, I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside of DC, but my whole life was going into DC and growing up in DC culture. And it's so funny when I moved to North Carolina, growing up in DC, and one of the big things is the go-go scene. And when I came to North Carolina, nobody knew what go-go music was. It's like, so anyway, so to hear that you are living in the DMV just makes me very, very happy. So that's awesome. So good. Well, like you mentioned, and the reason that you're here today is because you have your third book coming out, which having just released my first book in the spring and the amount of work and time and effort and just like labor that goes into that, to think about book number 3, like gives me like hot flashes. And so I'm just like really just incredibly proud of you and impressed and just amazing feat to come out with book number 3. And it is called Take Your Seat at the Table. And I want to dive right into this because, especially people that have followed you and know your work. And I mean, you host a podcast called The Table. And so this is a metaphor that you love to use both on your podcast and really is the theme throughout this book of the metaphor of the table that kind of represents this well-lived life. And so I would love for you to just kind of, as the foundation for our conversation, just kind of unpack that metaphor and share like why did you choose this as the central theme of your book and why is it such a big part of your podcast and all of that.
Yeah, when I think about that question, I'm honestly sitting at a table right now, having a conversation with you that my laptop is on. And the tabletop is sitting on 4 legs. And then on the 4 legs is a foundation. Well, we couldn't have a tabletop if the foundation wasn't sturdy enough and firm enough and flat enough, right? And I think sometimes in life, what I've realized that people, we skip over building a foundation that our life can stand on. We'll go from living paycheck to paycheck to wanting to learn how do we make $1 million overnight. But we didn't really build the wisdom nor the knowledge nor the strength to sustain whatever money we may have. We'll go from being single to want to be married, but you haven't worked on yourself mentally, spiritually, or practically to keep and sustain that marriage. And so when we look at it, people are losing money, they're living paycheck to paycheck. We have a high divorce rate, friendships are not sustaining simply because we really haven't taken the opportunity to build a solid foundation for our life. And that's why I wrote the book, Take Your Seat at the Table, because there's a huge part of me that I believe has to, and hear me clearly, watch this, it has to start with us. And so many times we allow other people to sit at the head of our tables and tell us what to do with our life and how to do things with our life. And we never take that opportunity. My life is not my life. My life was given to me by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So he is the pilot and I'm the co-pilot. But here on the earth, in the United States of America, it's my life and I need to take the head of that table. And so this book is really designed to help people understand, hey, what are the 8 crucial areas that you need to take control of? Not your mom, not your dad, not your husband, not your wife, not your boyfriend, girlfriend, boss, culture, community. I'm talking about what are the things that you need to take control of, and you invite people to your table. And just to break it down, your table is your life. So no one should be telling you what to do with your life. Your spouse shouldn't even tell you that. Y'all should have an agreement of what we're going to do together. But, Molly, I remember, and if I'm talking too much, let me know. I'm a Black preacher, so we can talk and keep on
No,
going.
that's good. I love it. Bring it. Preach it. Preach it, Deo.
I was at lunch one day, and I talk about this in my book. I was at lunch one day with one of my friends, and she came up to me, and she was like, "Man, my boss told me that I should, do this so I can become this, have this position by this time, and then this position will lead me to this position, and that position will lead me to the ultimate position of, VP of such and such inside a particular company. That would take me about like a total of 7 years. I could be making $160,000, $200,000 a year. Boom, 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 boom." I was like, wow. I said, okay. He said, and then he said, yeah. So that means that I can't have a baby within the next 10 years. I was like, how you feel about that? So, I mean, I want the position. I said, okay, I hear you. But how do you feel about it? Like, do you want a kid? Yes. Me and my husband were talking about it. We would like to have a kid in the next 2 years, 2 or 3 years. But your boss just told you what to do with your life. Did he ask you? Did you desire kids? Did he ask you what's your goals and vision for within inside the company? She was like, no. Did he ask you, do you even desire to be in this position that he thought of? No. So he didn't ask you what you wanted to do with your life. He told you what you're going to do with your life. She was like, yeah, but it's your life. It's your table. I said, sis, here's the thing with us. Bosses and jobs are designed to help us reach our potential. It's designed to help us go where God wants us to go. Your boss shouldn't tell you what you should do.
That's
Your
right.
boss should ask you, hey, how can we partner together? Yes, you're here for a job and an assignment, but are we even aligned with what you want to do in life? And if so, how can we work together so that way we can have a longevity within our relationship? Man, make a long story short, she ended up quitting that job, Molly, because they didn't care. They told her, like, hey, this is what we want for you. And you can't have kids if you want to get there. So she removed that person from her table, from her life. And she went and found another position that worked with her that she invited to take a seat at the side of her table while she reclaimed the head of her table, reclaimed the head of her life. And today she has 2 kids making $150,000 and she's not stressed because she took claim of her table.
Right. Man, that's so good because I think I was just having this conversation with a friend the other day who is a business owner, and she was telling me just about how like she has really struggled to find, because she's a a female entrepreneur, she's a female business owner, and she's really struggled to find this balance between hiring people and finding people that want to be a part of the vision for the company, but then also want to like take some initiative and help, kind of design roles around, filling holes and things like that. And she's talked about how just she wants to build a company that is very like family friendly, and she wants to, empower the people on her staff to not only, make decisions and kind of take ownership of things, but then also help, shape the vision for their own lives and things like that. And how she's seen this theme in, I feel like a lot of, and I don't want to make like, I'm not great at making a generalization about generations, but that there is kind of this theme where there's almost like this arrested development along with a lot of people kind of under the age of like 45,
Mhm.
where there's this kind of this age like 22 to 45 where you've got this kind of couple of generations. You've got some, elder millennials into Gen Z that they just don't know how to like take ownership of something. They don't know how to make a decision for themselves. Like they don't know how to just like, grab the bull by the horns or whatever. But then they're seeing the effects of the burnout of like Gen X and things like that, that just like all they did was work. And so they're seeing the effects of that. And so it's like this, like I said, arrested development where it's this inability to find the balance. And so I love the way that you talk about this, about you taking the seat at your own table and like taking ownership of making decisions in your own life. But that can feel really scary and hard for people, especially if they came from, a family of origin that had a lot of brokenness, or a lot of, you have like maybe one parent who was a workaholic with another parent that was a stay-at-home parent, but kind of emotionally absent. I mean, there's all kinds of complex things that we could talk about, or a single parent home where, mom or dad wasn't there and was working all the time, or all of those things. So speak to that person who maybe is really struggling and wrestling with, how do I get empowered to make decisions for my own life, when that seems really simple, but for somebody, especially when you bring those things like family of origin and all of those things into the equation, it can get really complicated really fast.
No, and it will get complicated really fast if you don't have a clear vision and direction for where you're going. I talk about this as well as it's easier for me to make decisions because my vision is making the decision for me.
Hmm.
I have to spend time to generate the vision, to write the vision, to make it plain. The problem that I see when people who are like, well, I don't want to say no, or I don't want to say yes, or I don't know how to make this decision. Well, it's because you haven't sat down and said clearly, what do you want to do and where do you want to go? So I specifically told myself 4 years ago, man, I want to help 1 million African American minority people get out of debt, build wealth, and start building a legacy they can pass down to their children's children. And I want to have that rooted from a biblical perspective. So
Yes.
now that I have that vision, when this opportunity comes up, does it align with the vision or does it not? If it aligns, cool, great. Let's move forward. If it doesn't align, I'm not saying no. The vision is saying it doesn't align. So the answer is no. And it's easy for me to make that decision because I'm sticking to the vision that me and God put together for my life during this season of my life. And
Mm.
so that is a crucial part of taking ownership of your table, AKA your life. You have to have a vision. And watch this, when you have a vision, it's even easier to invite people to your table. It's 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 easier to tell people you got to go or you're not welcome. Like I'm
Mhm.
single partially because there are some things that I got to work on within my own personal life. I'm never going to be perfect, but I'm working on those things. But another huge portion of that is they weren't aligned with the vision that I have for my life. So I couldn't invite you to take a seat at my table and we're not aligned in the direction of life where we want to go. So it's easy for me to say, nah, baby girl, I'm sorry. You ain't the one. You cool. You just ain't mine. You know? And it's easy to tell my family when they call me and ask me for money. It's easy for me to tell them no because hey, if I give you that, it's going to derail from my vision. I'm trying to put money up for a wedding one day. I'm trying to put money up for this. I got a vacation. I'm trying to buy more rental property. I'm sorry, I can't do that because it doesn't align with my vision. Hey, I can't take that job. Hey, I can't work with that person because it doesn't align with the vision. Or I can because it does. So if you find yourself struggling with taking ownership of your life and making these hard decisions, I want you to pause making decisions, and I want you to write down where are you going to be at the end of 2025? Where are you going to be by 2030? Okay. Get you a 1 year, 5 year, 10 year vision and goal. Work your way backwards. Once you do that, it is going to be so much easier for you to make decisions. And watch this. Hard decisions become easier decisions. And they say that they're easy, but they're easier to make.
Yeah.
It's part of life, Miley. We're going to make some decisions that's going to hurt, that's going to make us feel a little emotionally down, but that's part of life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that obviously just knowing and following your work for a number of years, know that a lot of this comes from your own life experience. And one of the major themes in your book is kind of learning from failures. And, I love that this is a theme that no matter what stage of life, we can all connect with this. And, you as a single man and me as a wife and mom of two young kids, this is something that as I'm my husband and I are raising our 11 and 8-year-old. We talk a lot about learning from failure, learning from mistakes. And that can be, especially when one of our children is a little bit more, what's the word, predisposed to want to get everything right the very first time and is a little bit of a perfectionist and a little bit of a like, if I'm not the absolute best at this, then that means I'm like, if I'm not first, you're last. Like it's a like like one of our children has adopted the Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last mindset. And obviously, as this is a child and a human being, more often than not, there's some loss. And so that's really hard. And so, my husband and I try to have these conversations with our kids about like, you have to learn from those mistakes. You have to learn from failure. And that is hard to accept as an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old. It's hard to accept for me at 39. I don't know how old you are, but like, it is hard. And so I'd love for you to kind of share how this has manifested itself in your own life. Like, how has failure in your own life shaped your approach to not just the content that you produce in your podcast, but also in your book?
I have a messy life, and it's not a messy to where it is a negative. But if you look at my desk, it's a little messy, but
Same.
it's still productive. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So I think when I see perfection, I don't see execution. If I see perfection, how are you executing when everything is strategically right? And so for me, there's going to be some failures in learning. There's going to be a little bit of messiness in progression, right? When I'm working out, I'm sweaty and I'm musty, right? So while you're sweating and you're musty, your muscles are growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nothing wrong. If you go for a jog, you should not come back smelling like roses. Okay. And so for me, when I hear people say, man, I failed, well, that's good. That means that you've learned something. That means that
Mm-hmm.
a muscle have grown in your brain. Something has grown in life that has taught you what to do and what not to do moving forward. And
Mm-hmm.
so I embrace failure because if I failed at something, it doesn't make me a failure. It makes me someone who tried to do something and learned from it. Now I can do it better the next time. I mean, you know how many relationships I failed at? You know how many business opportunities and business ideas I failed at? Doesn't make me a failure. I can count on the hand the last 4 years of running my business. I just knew I was going to have several 7-figure deals. I was like, man, oh yeah, this course right here gonna make me $1 million, and it made me 50,000. I'm like, well, that failed. But then I learned from it. I went and got me a coach. I learned, and failed again. But my company is still making over 7 figures a year. And so for me, what I think where we have to really understand, and you'll learn this inside the book, Take Your Seat at the Table. It's the last chapter, and it's called A Messy Table, and how to embrace a messy table. That we just had Thanksgiving last month. We just had it. I don't know about you, Molly, but I come from a black country family. And when we went to the table, it looked good to start.
Mm.
But once we all went through and we put our forks and our spoons inside of them, we looked back at the table, it was messy. But that food was still good. And we went
Mm,
back to the messy table to get some more of that good food. And so failure, messiness, it's not a negative. Embrace it, learn from
mm.
it, enjoy it, laugh. Just make sure that you keep moving forward. And that's how I embrace failure. Here's the truth, and I'll be quiet after this one. I'm going to fail again at something. I'm going to fail because here's what I've learned: failure means I'm stepping outside of my comfort zone and allowing God to really be everything. If you're maximizing and killing every single thing in your life, that means you're in your comfort zone and you're not really stretching yourself to go any further. I'm back in school to get my MBA, and I didn't get an F, but I got a B minus on the report. And I was like, to me, that's failure. I was like, yo, if I'm gonna go back to school, I need an A. I need an A. And I got that. I was like, yo, what the heck? And he got my paper all marked up and this and that, this and that, this and that, this and that. I said, okay, cool. Well, I turned in the paper early. So I sent my professor an email. I said, hey, the paper is not due for another 3 days. Can I learn from your markups and represent the paper? He said, as long as it's in before the due date. Sure thing. Got a B minus. Went through all the red markups, went through his notations, turned it back in. I got an A.
Mm.
Now, that's not an F to an A, but to me, I was like, I told myself going back to school, I want nothing but a B or higher. So a B minus is not a B. So I was like, I need to go back and I need to go to it. But I didn't cry. I didn't feel bad. I wasn't upset. I was like, yo, okay, I failed at this part of the goal. What can I learn from it? And I learned a lot from it. And watch this. I'm glad that he gave me a B minus because I missed something that I needed to pass the final exam. And if he would not have gave me that B minus, and if I would not have asked him, can I read this and represent it? And he said yes, I would have missed out on the final grade that was so important because I got a B minus and I want to go learn from the B minus. So I went back and learned. I got it right. It came up in a final exam and I was able to pass. I got an A. I said, boy, look at God. Look at God.
Won't he do it?
Yes, you know what I'm saying? So embrace it, man, and learn from it. Okay, cool. Don't cry, don't get pitful about it. Like just enjoy it, embrace it, learn from it, and progress forward.
That's so good. That's so good. Well, I was kind of thinking about this as you were talking, and again, we've kind of been, you use this table of the metaphor of the metaphor of the table to represent your life and having conversations with yourself at the table. And I think about what was really interesting is so you mentioned Thanksgiving. So one thing that my family and I have done for a number of years, this is something that I carry from my childhood is from my childhood, I think I talked about this on the podcast before, maybe not, but when I was growing up, like both my parents were recovering alcoholics. And so our Thanksgivings were always really, really loud and really, really busy because my parents would invite all of their other recovering alcoholics that had been like kicked out of their families, like ostracized, people who are without a home. That kind of is like a island of misfit toys around the Thanksgiving table. And so that is something that my family and I have continued into our family tradition is we invite people who need a place to go for Thanksgiving. And that can look like a lot of different people, but we also connect with, we are surrounded by a lot of universities here. And so we invite people, from all over the world who are studying here internationally. And so this past Thanksgiving, we had 11 people from a combination of like India, Ecuador, kind of that area. And so it was really interesting because we're sitting around the table and I'm listening to some conversations and, we're coming from all different faith backgrounds, different belief systems, all these things. And there were some pretty like deep, hard conversations. Like we had some of the Indian students who are like talking about their feelings of the caste system, which is something that I have no concept or understanding about. And then they're asking about American politics and culture. And it was actually really beautiful because we were kind of coming from it from this place of like love and understanding. And so I set that up to ask you with the metaphor of the table in mind, like when you're having hard conversations with yourself and you're having to look internally and do some internal work that can feel stressful. You're wrestling with maybe facing some demons you didn't want to face, or you're even disagreeing with yourself. You've got that like inner turmoil. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you create a space to wrestle and to have those hard conversations with yourself?
That's such a good question. And it's a simple answer and it's not a deep one. Don't do it by yourself. And I tell this to everyone, it's like, man, if you know you're battling something internal, why are you doing it by yourself? Why? This is when I say you need to invite a therapist to your table, an emotional coach to your table, and a spiritual advisor slash pastor to your table.
Yes.
Because it's like if you feel as if you have it all under control, you're going to make some bad decisions that could eventually harm your personal life or harm other people connected to you. To this day, I see a therapist. To this day, I see an emotional coach. And to this day, I have a spiritual advisor. I have two, my pastor and another older guy. And man, I'm single. And sometimes, if I'm being honest and transparent, Molly, sometimes I get a little depressed. And sometimes I'll be sitting at the house. It's getting cold right now, Molly. Let's keep it a buck. You've been married for a while. When you're cold, you go to your husband. And when you're single and you're cold, I just got a black dog. And I ain't going to my black dog. But then that sometimes them Instagram pictures be looking good, Molly. Sometimes I get a text message saying, "Hey, how are you doing?" And my mind be saying, "Well, me."
Mhm. Yeah. Mm.
Who was giving me wisdom, holding me accountability, and watch this, someone I could be 110% honest with my flaws, my sins, my weaknesses, my concerns, my mental state, and not judge me. And I think sometimes we go to Instagram, we pull up our phone and say, "Man, I'm just feeling da da da." That's the wrong place to do it. Because everyone gonna call you crazy, gonna call you stupid, you need help, or
Yes.
girl, you just doing this, or boy, you just doing this. Go, you only got one life, go live it. And the next thing you know, you go live it. Now you got a baby. Now you got this. Now you up here. You did. So for me, when you know you're struggling with something up here mentally, let me say this to everyone listening. I don't care if you got a beautiful family, no issues. Everybody has some kind of struggle in their minds mentally. Everybody. We all have something that we're battling with mentally, that we're battling with spiritually. There'll be no reason for God to come down here to give us life and to have life more abundantly if we weren't battling something, right? So there was a reason why, and he knew that, like, hey, I came to give you life and have life more abundantly, but I'm also going to die for your sins because the only way you can get to heaven is if I come and intercede for you because your life is going to be jacked up. So if God knew and knows our life is going to be jacked up, what makes us think that our life is not jacked up? And everything that happens on the external starts from the internal. And so for me, I've just learned I want to eliminate as much stress and headache and pain and sorrow and bad decisions as much as possible up front by making sure that I invite a therapist, an emotional coach, and a pastor to my table to hold me accountable and someone who I can trust. So that's what I would say. Don't do it alone, man. Pay that money and get you some help because it's going to bless you tremendously.
Man, Anthony, that's so good. Well, man, I know we have run out of time. I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, and you just have such wisdom. And man, I could ask you so many more questions, but I'm just so grateful for you just sharing your wisdom. And I know that you are helping so many people. So tell the listeners the best way that they can connect with you and learn more and all those things.
Man, it's simple. Go to my website, anthonyoneil.com. You'll see my book there, man. We're giving away a lot of like $2,000 worth of bonuses if you pre-order the book from Molly's show today. Just for your audience, Molly, if they order the book, we're going to send them a free 8-hour how to go from 40,000 to a 7-figure $1 million net worth. And so if you go to anthonyoneil.com/book, pre-order the book for like $25, you're going to get this $500 course 100% free because we want to help people take control of their lives, but then also
That's
make a
right.
lot of money while doing it. So check it out. All my stuff there, social media information, some freebies to help you budget, to help you get a pay raise in 2025. We got a bunch of stuff over there. So check me out.
So good. Thank you so much for being here, Anthony. You're awesome.
Thank you, Molly.